The invitation. I was rinsing the last of the coffee grounds from my mug when I heard the envelope slide under my apartment door. It made a soft but strangely heavy sound, like a small verdict landing at my feet. No one in this town sent letters anymore, especially not to me. Most people preferred to whisper about me rather than speak to me directly. I hesitated before picking it up. The paper was thick, the kind you only find in old stationery stores or tucked away in antique desks. My name, my full name, something no one had used in years, was written in a careful, looping script I recognized instantly. My grandfather's handwriting. A tremor crawled up my spine. He'd been gone for 3 days. I hadn't expected anything from him. Not a mention in the will, not a final message, not even a lingering thought. Our last conversation had ended with a slammed door and a whispered apology that never made it past my tongue. For a moment I just stared at the envelope, unsure if opening it would be an act of courage or foolishness. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment and a smaller card clipped to the top. The parchment read, "To my grandson, you are invited to the public reading of my will, Town Hall, Saturday noon. Attendance required." My stomach tightened. Public reading. Wills weren't read publicly in our world anymore. They were signed, scanned, emailed, and filed away quietly. A public reading was something out of an old novel, a theatrical slice of small-town drama meant to draw attention, spark whispers, and maybe, if the family was fractured enough, ignite scandal. And my family was fractured far beyond repair. I flipped the smaller card over. It wasn't written by my grandfather. The handwriting was too neat, too professional, too soulless. "The entire Hart family and town representatives will be present. Please arrive on time." "Our town representatives," I muttered under my breath. "What is this? A trial?" I sank onto the edge of my couch, the old springs creaking beneath me. Memories churned. The last time I visited my grandfather's house, he barely looked at me. The time before that, he told me to leave, voice trembling, eyes red. And once, years ago, he gripped my shoulders tightly and whispered, "Stay away from them when I'm gone. They'll tear you apart if you let them." I'd never understood what he meant. A sudden knock on the wall from my neighbor snapped me out of my thoughts. I realized I'd been sitting there for several minutes, staring at the letter as if it were a ghost trying to speak. I stood, pacing the living room. Why had he sent this? Why publicly? Why involve the entire town? My aunts, my cousins, they would treat this as entertainment, a stage, another opportunity to point fingers, to remind everyone that I was the lost one, the ungrateful one, the one who walked away. They never cared about the truth, only the story they could manipulate. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. The heaviness in my chest didn't lift. If anything, it deepened, because I knew, no matter how much I wanted to avoid them, no matter how much dread twisted inside me, I had no choice. The words, "attendance required," were deliberate, not a request, a command, my grandfather's final command. And despite everything, despite the distance, the silence, the unhealed wounds, I couldn't ignore him, not in life and not in death. As I set the envelope on my coffee table, a gust of wind rattled the window pane. It sounded like a warning, or a promise. Saturday at noon. Whatever waited for me in that town hall, whatever truth or lie or spectacle was about to unfold, I could already feel its weight. Something in my grandfather's final message wasn't just calling me, it was pulling me. The gathering of wolves. The town hall sat at the center of Hartville like an aging monument. White pillars cracked from decades of sun, the wide steps worn down by generations of small-town politics and petty arguments. As I approached, the air buzzed with a strange electricity. Conversations floated in the breeze, sharp and pointed, like knives waiting for a place to land. I recognized the voices long before I recognized the faces. "Do you think he'll show?" "He has to." It said, "required." "I bet he comes late." Like always. A disgrace! William deserved better. My chest tightened. I wasn't even inside yet, and already the crowd was circling like vultures, hungry for a story. Some people weren't even related to my grandfather. They were just here for the spectacle. Hartville thrived on gossip. A public will reading was a feast. I kept my eyes low and climbed the steps. My hand brushed the cold rail, grounding me. It didn't help. When I pushed open the tall wooden doors, the sound hit me first. Voices bouncing off the high ceiling in a chaos of whispers and accusations. The hall was nearly full. Rows of chairs lined the room, with people already turned backward in their seats, craning their necks to see who entered, and when they saw me... Silence cracked through the room like lightning. It lasted only a second. Then the whispering returned, louder, thicker, more venomous. I spotted my Aunt Marlene immediately. She stood near the front, dressed in black that was a little too elegant for mourning. Her hair was pinned into a tight bun, her lipstick a harsh shade of red that made her smile look like a wound. When her eyes found mine, her expression sharpened into something predatory. "Well, well," she said, loud enough for several rows to hear. "The prodigal grandson decides to grace us with his presence." Her sister, Aunt Judith, leaned in with a smirk. Surprised he had the courage. Laughter rippled across their circle of relatives. I felt every eye in the room digging into me. Some were curious, others judgmental, a few downright hostile. I recognized cousins, second cousins, people I used to know when life was simpler and less cruel. Now they stared as if I were a criminal walking into his own sentencing. My instinct told me to turn around, to leave, to run back to my quiet apartment where the ghosts of my family couldn't follow. But then I saw him, Mr. Whitmore, the lawyer, standing near the podium with a folder tucked under his arm and worry etched into his tired eyes. When he noticed me, he gave a small nod, not warm, not comforting, but respectful, like he understood what walking into this room cost me. I forced myself forward. As I walked down the aisle, I caught fragments of whispered poison. He didn't visit once. He only came for the money. Poor William. He must have died disappointed. My jaw tightened. My hands curled into fists. The lies clung to me like smoke. When I reached the front row, Marlene shifted, blocking the empty seat beside her with her purse. "This section is for family," she said coldly. "I am family," I replied, my voice low. Her smile widened unnaturally. "Not anymore." The words hit harder than a slap. Before I could respond, Whitmore stepped forward. "This seat is reserved for him," he said firmly, gesturing to the space. "By William's explicit instruction." Marlene's face twitched. Shock, confusion, something darker, but she didn't argue. She lifted her purse with a stiff motion. I sat down slowly. My pulse thundered in my ears. The wood of the chair was cold, the air thick with judgment. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes pressing against my back. The hall doors closed behind us with a resounding boom. Whitmore stepped to the podium, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, please settle. We will begin the reading of William Hart's will shortly." The room quieted, though the tension only grew heavier. In that moment, surrounded by people who wanted me gone, erased or humiliated, I realized something. This wasn't just a will reading. It was an ambush, a gathering of wolves waiting for the first sign of blood. The will begins. The murmurs faded into a heavy, suffocating quiet as Mr. Whitmore adjusted his glasses and placed a thick, cream-colored folder on the podium. The faint tap of the folder hitting the wood echoed through the hall like a starting gun. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, bracing for impact. "This will," he began, voice steady but taut, "was written and signed by William Hart on the 14th of last month. He insisted it be read in the presence of family, close community members, and—" He hesitated, scanning the room. "Anyone else who wished to pay their respects." I could almost hear the collective smugness swelling in the crowd. People shifted, lifted their chins, satisfied to be included in something that felt exclusive, dramatic, historic even. That was Hartville for you. Tragedy was entertainment, and my family was the longest-running show in town. Whitmore unfolded the first page. The paper crackled softly, a fragile sound that somehow made my throat tighten. "My dear family," he read, "and those gathered today." A ripple of gasps floated across the room. Even after death, my grandfather commanded attention like a general entering battle. "I want to begin by thanking you for coming," Whitmore continued, his voice taking on the cadence of my grandfather's words. "Though, if I'm honest, I suspect most of you are here out of curiosity rather than affection." Soft laughter, nervous, uncomfortable, trickled through the hall. My aunt stiffened. Marlene's lips pressed into a thin, offended line. I swallowed a small, bitter smile. That sounded exactly like him. "Let us proceed with the formalities," Whitmore said, turning the page. He listed assets in the dry, procedural tone of legal recitations. The house on Willow Creek Road, the surrounding acres of farmland, a series of bank accounts, investments tied to the old hardware business. Every item felt like a piece of history being catalogued. I remembered following my grandfather around that property as a child, the scent of sawdust and fresh earth clinging to his clothes. Now those memories were being read like inventory. As the list grew, so did the tension. I could feel the greed radiating from certain relatives, Marlene especially, her eyes sharp and hungry, as if she could calculate the exact dollar amount behind every sentence. Then Whitmore paused. He inhaled slowly, adjusting his glasses again. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed the next page. Something changed in the air. A stillness, a sense of something yet unsaid. "Before I move on to the allocations," he said, voice lower, "William left a personal note addressed to the family." A collective inhale swept the room. "Please skip it," Marlene snapped. "We don't need his opinions. Just tell us who gets what." Whitmore's gaze hardened. "Mrs. Marlene, William insisted this be read aloud before any distribution." Marlene's jaw clenched. She sat back, but her glare could have carved stone. Whitmore looked down at the page. "To my children," he read, "and to the grandchildren who remained by my side or who couldn't, for reasons they know well." A whisper ran through the rows. I felt my pulse spike. Was that directed at me or everyone? "I hope you'll hear these words not as judgment, but as truth." Truth. The word struck deeper than it should have. Families fracture, sometimes through tragedy, sometimes through cruelty, and sometimes because people cannot bear to face each other's mistakes. My breath caught. He wasn't even halfway through the line, and the room was already shifting uncomfortably. "I have made many mistakes myself," Whitmore continued, "and I have paid for them in ways none of you will ever truly understand." Someone at the back muttered, "Oh, here we go," earning a scowl from multiple relatives. Whitmore raised his voice slightly. "But some of you—" Another pause, longer, heavier. "Have inflicted wounds on this family that time alone will not heal." The air in the hall grew cold. Marlene sat frozen, her face pale beneath her makeup. Judith's fingers twisted in her lap. People shifted, the room buzzing with silent accusations, and sitting there, listening to the sharp edge of my grandfather's words, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel at all: fear. As Whitmore prepared to turn the page, I realized this was no ordinary will. This was the beginning of an unearthing, something buried, something dangerous, and I wasn't sure any of us were ready for it. The accusation. Whitmore turned the page with deliberate slowness, as though preparing the room for another blow. But before he could continue, a harsh scrape echoed through the hall. Chairs shifting, fabric rustling, a sudden intake of breath. Marlene stood. Her movements were sharp, jerky, fueled by a fury that had clearly been simmering long before today. Her eyes, cold, dark, and gleaming with something vindictive, locked on me. "No," she said, voice cutting through the air like broken glass. "I'm not letting him read another word until we address something." Whitmore froze. The entire room fell silent. I felt a spark of dread flicker in my chest. Marlene took a step forward, positioning herself between the lawyer and the crowd. "I refuse to sit here and let this performance go on without acknowledging the truth." She pointed directly at me, her finger trembling with adrenaline. "He shouldn't even be here." Whispers burst instantly, tiny explosions around the hall. My stomach tightened. I knew this was coming. I had felt it building from the moment I walked through the door. Still, hearing it out loud made my pulse hammer so violently I thought my ribs might crack. "What exactly do you mean, Mrs. Hart?" Whitmore asked cautiously. She let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Oh, please, as if you don't know, as if everyone doesn't know." Her gaze swept the room, feeding off the attention. "He abandoned William. Completely. Didn't visit him once in the last year of his life." Gasps, murmurs, disgusted shakes of heads. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug crescent moons into my palms. "That's not true," I said, my voice rough. "Oh, isn't it?" she snapped, whipping toward me. "Where were you when he fell and broke his hip? Where were you when he spent Christmas alone? Where were you when he—" "Enough," Whitmore interjected, but no one was listening. Marlene was in full performance mode now, her voice rising, her arms gesturing dramatically, her expression twisting into righteous indignation. "You never cared about him," she shouted. "You only show up now because you think you're getting something. You made him die thinking you'd forgotten him." The words hit like blades, sharp, merciless, meant to draw blood. The room reacted instantly. A woman in the second row whispered, "Poor William." A man muttered, "Disgraceful." Someone else said, "He only comes around when there's money on the table." Heat burned up my neck. My vision blurred for a moment, a mix of humiliation and rage swirling so fast I could hardly breathe. "You have no idea what happened," I managed to say. "No, you don't have the right to speak," Marlene snarled. "You forfeited that when you abandoned him. We were there. We took care of him. We suffered. You didn't lift a finger." "Sit down, Mrs. Hart," Whitmore ordered again, firmer this time. But she wasn't finished. She stepped even closer to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that still carried across the hall. "You don't deserve to be part of this family, and you certainly don't deserve a place in his will." The room erupted into murmurs that felt like a rising storm, surging waves of disapproval crashing against me, pulling me under, suffocating me. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to scream the truth, to tear down the lies she had built over years. But nothing came out. My throat constricted, strangling the words before they could escape. Marlene straightened, triumphant, like she'd delivered a fatal blow. "I move that he be excluded from this reading." Chaos erupted. "No authority. She's right. He shouldn't benefit. This is ridiculous. Let him speak." The room became a battlefield. Whitmore raised both hands, voice booming, "Enough!" But the damage was done. Dozens of eyes glared at me with disgust, disappointment, almost gleeful contempt. And in that moment, standing in the center of a judgmental crowd, stripped bare by lies, I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not even shame, but a chilling certainty. This was exactly what my grandfather feared, exactly what he tried to protect me from. And the worst part? The real truth, the one I had sworn to keep, still hadn't even begun to surface. The hidden compartment. Whitmore's shout finally brought the hall to a grudging silence. The echoes of arguments lingered in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. But for a moment, just a moment, people stopped tearing into one another. Marlene stood rigid, chest heaving, waiting for applause that never came. I sat frozen, my pulse thundering in my ears, my throat raw from words I hadn't managed to speak. Whitmore cleared his throat, trying to salvage the ceremony. "As executor of William's estate," he said carefully, "I must proceed according to his written instructions. No one, absolutely no one, can be excluded unless the will explicitly states it." His gaze flicked toward me, heavy with something that looked like sympathy. Marlene's lips curled. Before anyone could react, a voice rose from the back of the hall. "Whitmore!" Everyone turned. An older man, thin, stooped, his hands trembling slightly, pushed himself to his feet. I recognized him after a moment. Mr. Lawson, my grandfather's friend for nearly 50 years. The two had played chess every Thursday at the diner when I was a kid. His eyes found Whitmore's, urgent and shining with something close to panic. "You're forgetting the envelope," he said, voice cracking. A murmur rolled through the room. Whitmore blinked. "What envelope?" Lawson hobbled forward, leaning heavily on his cane. "The one William told you about. He made me swear I'd remind you if things turned ugly." The entire hall reacted at once. Whispers, gasps, shifting bodies, widening eyes. Marlene's face drained of color. "What envelope?" she demanded, stepping forward like she intended to grab the lawyer. Lawson pointed a shaking finger toward the front of the hall. "In his desk," he said. "Bottom left drawer. Hidden compartment." My breath caught. That desk, the old, heavy oak monster that sat in my grandfather's study, was practically a relic. I had spent hours next to it as a kid, drawing pictures while he worked. I never imagined it held secrets. Whitmore hesitated, uncertainty flashing across his face. Then he signaled to two assistants. "Bring the desk." The room buzzed with rising curiosity. Some people stood, craning their necks to see. Others whispered theories, ridiculous and dramatic. A few simply watched in eerie silence. The assistants rolled in the antique desk on a cart from the adjoining office. Its surface was scratched and dented, its drawers swollen with age. It looked tired, like it had been guarding something for far too long. Whitmore approached it with slow, deliberate movements, as though afraid it might sink its teeth into him. He opened the bottom left drawer. Nothing but dust, old pens, and an unused receipt book. Marlene scoffed loudly. "See? He's making it up." But Lawson shook his head, determined. "No. There's a switch. William showed me once. You press along the inner left panel." Whitmore crouched down, running his fingers along the edge. The hall had gone so silent I could hear fabric rustling as people leaned forward. Then a tiny click. A soft gasp swept the room. A narrow wooden panel slid open from the drawer's interior wall, revealing a perfectly preserved ivory envelope, its edges crisp, its seal intact, bearing two engraved letters, W.H., my grandfather's initials. The air left my lungs. Marlene lurched forward. "Don't touch that!" Whitmore ignored her. With trembling fingers, he lifted the envelope from the compartment. For a moment he just held it, staring at it in awe, as though he understood the weight it carried. He turned it over, inspecting the seal. "He only sealed letters like this for things of utmost importance," he murmured. The hall buzzed with restless anticipation. "What does it say?" someone whispered. "Read it," others urged. "This changes everything," another muttered. Marlene was shaking now, not with anger, but with fear. Whitmore broke the seal gently, as though afraid the paper might shatter under his hands. He unfolded the letter. His eyes moved across the page and widened. He swallowed hard. "This," he whispered, unable to continue. Everyone leaned forward. "In God's name," he breathed, "you all need to hear this." And in that suspended moment, as every breath in the room held still, I felt the first tremor of truth rising from the grave. The secret letter. Whitmore gripped the letter like it was radioactive, his knuckles turning white as he steadied himself. The room was dead silent. Even the air felt suspended, waiting. Every gaze, dozens of them, were pinned to that single sheet of paper, as if the truth itself was about to be resurrected. He cleared his throat, but his voice cracked on the first syllable. I'll read it exactly as written." He took a breath, slow, trembling, and began. "To those gathered today." My heart stuttered. Hearing my grandfather's voice through someone else's throat felt like being shaken awake from a nightmare. "If this letter is being read, it means the room has turned hostile." Gasps erupted instantly. Marlene flinched as if struck. Judith looked away. Some people murmured prayers under their breath. Whitmore continued. "I predicted that accusations would fly, that lies would surface, and that my grandson would be cornered by the same cruelty I tried to shield him from. My breath faltered. A pressure, thick and burning, built behind my eyes. To my grandson, forgive me. I asked you to distance yourself from me these last months. I told you harsh words I did not mean. You obeyed me, even when it broke your heart. You honored a request you did not understand. Something cracked inside me, small, fragile, necessary. The murmurs began again, this time softer, confused, shaken. Whitmore paused, visibly affected, then forced himself onward. To the rest of you. The room tensed as if bracing for impact. You blamed him for staying away. You whispered that he was ungrateful, heartless, selfish. But you all know better. You all know I pushed him away. Marlene took a step back as if the floor tilted beneath her. I did it because I discovered that certain members of this family were planning to use him, to manipulate him, to guilt him, to turn him into their personal lifeline. Quiet panic washed over the hall. People exchanged looks. One of my cousins mouthed, "He knew." Over the years, I allowed myself to be drained, financially, emotionally, spiritually, by those who thought my generosity was infinite. Judith shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her arms. When I finally said no, they forged my signature. Shock detonated through the room. A man in the back burst out, "Forged? Who? When?" Whitmore raised his hand for silence as he read the next lines. "The forgery happened last spring. A check for $10,000, signed with my name without my hand." Marlene's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. I stared at her, feeling a cold clarity crystallize inside me. I had suspected many things, but not this. Whitmore continued, voice tightening. "They justified it by telling themselves I owed them, that blood entitled them to whatever they wanted." The word entitled echoed painfully through the hall. Once I uncovered the truth, I took precautions. I protected what little peace I had left, and I protected my grandson from becoming their next target. My breath shuddered out of me. Protected. He had protected me. Not punished me, not rejected me, not given up on me. Protected. Whitmore blinked hard, visibly shaken. "There's more." "Marlene." Her head snapped up. A hush rippled outward like a shockwave. "You were the one who told him to stay away from me. You told him I did not want to see him anymore. You twisted my words and my exhaustion into ammunition." Gasps, whispers, a full-blown uproar. Marlene shook her head wildly. "That's a lie. He's lying. This is a setup." But Whitmore kept reading. "You told him I said he was a disappointment, that I was tired of him, that I wanted distance." A sob burst from my chest before I could stop it, because I remembered that phone call. Her voice cold, cruel, absolute. "He doesn't want to see you anymore. Don't embarrass yourself by going back." "I never said those words," Whitmore continued, his voice trembling. "He was the only one who never asked me for anything, the only one who loved me without expectation." A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't bother wiping it away. "So if he is being accused today, if he is standing alone, remember this. He is innocent, and I am the one who wronged him first." Silence swallowed the hall whole. No one moved, no one breathed. And as Whitmore lowered the letter, his hands trembling, I realized this wasn't just a message, it was an indictment, a confession, a final act of love wrapped in painful truth, and it was about to shatter everything. The twist. The hall had frozen into a tableau of shock, faces caught mid-breath, mid-blink, mid-judgment. The truth in my grandfather's letter had sliced through the room like a blade, tearing open years of lies, exposing wounds everyone pretended didn't exist. But Whitmore wasn't finished. He stared at the bottom of the page, his brows knitting together, his mouth tightening into a thin line. Then he looked up at me, directly, intensely, as if preparing me for another blow. There is an addendum," he said quietly, written in his final days. A ripple of fear threaded through the crowd. Marlene clutched her scarf like it was strangling her. Judith whispered something frantic to her son. Even Lawson leaned forward, gripping his cane as though bracing himself physically. Whitmore unfolded a smaller slip of paper attached to the back of the letter. I could feel it. Something was coming, something bigger. Something that would not just expose lies, but redefine everything. He cleared his throat and read, "There is one truth I never found the courage to speak in life, but death leaves little room for cowardice." The room leaned in. My blood ran cold. My grandson deserves to know why I was so afraid of losing him, why I pushed him away, why I protected him even when it cost me our relationship. My heart hammered violently. The forgery was not the only betrayal I discovered last year. Gasps rippled across the hall. Whitmore swallowed hard before continuing. "I found documents in a box your grandmother hid, a box I had never seen. Birth records, letters, a confession she wrote shortly before she died." The room exploded with whispers. People twisted in their seats. Judith covered her mouth with shaking hands. Whitmore steadied himself. "The truth is this." Every muscle in my body tensed. He is not my biological grandson. The floor dropped out from under me. I felt the breath ripped from my lungs, the world tilting sharply, sounds muffled as if underwater. My heart stuttered, then pounded, then froze. Not biological? My vision blurred. Whitmore continued, voice strained. "Your mother had a child before she met my son. She kept it secret. She feared judgment, feared rejection, feared ruining the Hart family name. She confided only in your grandmother. When she married my son, they decided together to raise you as his, out of love, not deceit." The audience murmured like a hive of angry bees. "I learned this truth late in life and it broke me, not because you were not blood, but because I had failed to see how much pain your mother carried." I felt myself swaying. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening here, not in front of these people, not publicly, not like this. Whitmore's voice grew softer, yet somehow heavier. "When I first read the letters, I panicked. I feared losing you. I feared you would walk away. I feared my son's legacy would crumble under the weight of a secret he never knew how to face." A lump formed in my throat, hard and painful. Marlene stared at me with something horrifyingly triumphant and terrified all at once. "You see," she hissed to those near her, "not even blood." But Whitmore wasn't done. He lifted the letter and read the final lines louder, louder than necessary, louder than the accusations rising from the seats around him. "But blood means nothing to me compared to loyalty, kindness, and the years you stood by my side when no one else did." The hall quieted. "You were my family when the rest abandoned me. You were my joy, my pride, my only real legacy, and you deserve everything I leave behind, not because of blood, but because of love." My knees threatened to give way. "I did not tell you the truth because I feared you would think you didn't belong. But you belong more than any of them ever did." The room fell into stunned silence. No one dared breathe. No one dared move. And then Whitmore whispered the final sentence, "Forgive my cowardice. Forgive what I failed to say in life. You are my heart, even if you were not my blood." The paper trembled in his hands, and the hall erupted. Voices clashed, anger, disbelief, confusion, denial. Accusations flew, chairs scraped. Marlene screamed something unintelligible. People pointed, gasped, demanded explanations. But all the noise dissolved around me, because in that moment, the moment the truth shattered my identity and rebuilt it in the same breath, I finally understood. My grandfather hadn't just hidden a will. He had hidden me, my story, my truth, my place in the world. And now, in front of everyone, he had revealed it, not to ruin me, but to free me. The grandfather's last request. The hall dissolved into chaos. Voices rose like crashing waves, loud, overlapping, desperate. "He's not even a real heart. This changes the entire will. That can't be legal. Bloodline matters. This is madness." Dozens of eyes stabbed into me, some gleeful, some hateful, some simply stunned. It didn't matter. The words clung to my skin like ash. Not his biological grandson. Not a true heart, not one of them. A hole opened inside my chest, dark, cavernous, terrifyingly deep. But just as quickly, a warmth flickered through it, like a single candle burning stubbornly against a storm. You were my heart, even if you were not my blood. My grandfather's words echoed louder than the crowd. Whitmore slammed his palm against the podium. Silence! The command cracked like thunder, echoing through the hall. The noise faltered, then fell into tense, ragged quiet. His face was pale, but his voice remained firm. There are still pages left in the will, and by law they must be read. Marlene lunged forward. This is a fraud. He has no right. Whitmore raised his hand, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. Sit down, Mrs. Hart. Another interruption, and I will remove you from these proceedings. The threat stunned her into silence. He turned back to the papers, flipping to the main section of the will, the part everyone had been waiting for, the part that held the power to crush or crown. He cleared his throat. To my family. The air thickened. I leave behind what remains of my estate, the Hart house, the surrounding farmland, the business assets, and all liquid funds. People leaned forward, hungry. Whitmore continued. But understand this, the inheritance will not be divided equally. It will not be split according to blood. It will be given to the one who has shown loyalty, kindness, and integrity. Gasps, faint protests. Marlene's face drained completely of color. Whitmore read on. I have watched you all over the years. Some of you visited only when you needed money. Some of you lied for convenience. Some of you fed on resentment and refused accountability. Judith looked like she'd been slapped. And one of you? Whitmore paused. My breath hitched. One of you became the only person who stood by me when I was weak, who listened when I had nothing left to give, who asked for nothing. He looked straight at me. My heart stopped. So I leave everything, my home, my land, my savings, my business, to my grandson. The hall erupted. People stood. Shouts exploded. Someone yelled, "He's not even blood." Another cried, "This is insane." A third demanded, contest it now." But Whitmore wasn't finished. He raised his voice, overpowering the chaos. Yes, he may not be my biological grandson, but family is not decided by blood. It is proven by character, and none of you showed me the loyalty he did. Then my throat tightened, tears burning at the edges of my vision. I know this decision will spark outrage. I expect screaming, accusations, attempts to rewrite truth. Whitmore paused, letting the words sink in. But the truth is this. The Hart name was built on hard work, honor, and love, none of which I have witnessed from those who now shout the loudest. Marlene sank into her seat, shaking violently. My final request is simple. Honor this decision. Do not poison what is left of this family with greed. A bitter, ironic laugh escaped someone in the back. Whitmore read the final line with gravity. If you cannot accept my wishes, understand that you were the reason I had so few wishes left. Silence thundered through the room. For the first time since I arrived, no one spoke, no one moved. They simply stared at me, some with hatred, others with disbelief, a few with something like regret. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt cracked open, exposed, overwhelmed, drowning in the weight of truths I never asked for. But beneath all that, a new feeling stirred. A flicker of worth, a fragile sense of belonging, a whisper of redemption. For the first time in years, I felt my grandfather's presence, not as a ghost, not as a regret, but as a hand resting firmly on my shoulder. His last wish wasn't for wealth. It was for truth, and now it was mine to carry. The confrontation, the silence that followed the reading of the will, wasn't peace, it was pressure, heavy, suffocating, electric. A storm waiting for the first crack of lightning. And it came from Marlene. She shot to her feet so abruptly her chair toppled backward, clattering against the floor. Her face was a mask of rage, flushed red, eyes wild, lips trembling with fury she could no longer contain. "No!" she choked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "No, I won't accept this. I refuse to accept this." Judith tried to pull her back down. "Marlene, stop! Don't touch me!" she snapped, yanking her arm away. Dozens of heads swiveled toward me, drawn to the center of her fury like moths to flame. "He's not family!" she screamed, voice cracking. "He's nothing! He's not blood! He's not a heart! He's a stray someone dumped on us, and William—" Her voice quivered. "William was too weak to see it." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. I rose from my chair slowly, my legs trembling but steady enough to hold me. My heart pounded like a war drum, but something inside me was changing, hardening, crystallizing. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking. I wasn't the one apologizing or explaining. I was done being their quiet target. "Marlene," I said, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air, "you've spent years pretending to protect the family name, but all you've ever protected is your pride." Her face contorted. "How dare you—" "No," I said, stepping closer. "How dare you? How dare you lie to me, manipulate me, poison everything between me and him? How dare you try to erase the last thing he wanted to leave behind?" I could hear whispers around us. "He's right. She did lie. There's always been something off about her." Marlene heard them too. She flinched, rage flashing across her features like a lightning strike. "You think you deserve any of this?" she spat. "You think he actually loved you? You weren't even his." The words hit hard. They were meant to, but this time, they didn't break me. I stepped forward until we were only a few feet apart. "He loved me enough to protect me from you." Her nostrils flared. "He pitied you." "No," I said, shaking my head. "He pitied what you've become." Her hand flew up, fast, impulsive, trembling with fury, as if she intended to slap me. Gasps exploded around us. But before she could touch me, I caught her wrist mid-air. Her eyes widened with shock. "No more," I said softly, but the words landed like stone. "No more control. No more lies. No more rewriting the truth because it suits you." I released her wrist. She stumbled back as if pushed by her own momentum. The room watched, silent, breathless. I turned to face the rest of the hall. "For years, I believed I was the problem," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "I believed I disappointed him. I believed I wasn't enough." No one looked away. "But he asked me to stay away because he was afraid of you, all of you who used him until there was nothing left. You drove him into loneliness. You drained him. You broke him." My voice cracked. "And then you blamed me for his pain." Someone sobbed quietly. Someone else bowed their head. I took a breath. Steady, deep, necessary. "I may not be his blood," I continued, "but I was the one who showed up when it mattered. I was the one who didn't ask for anything. I was the one who believed in the man he really was, not the man you needed him to be." My gaze swept across the hall. "And he chose me, not because he had to, not because of blood, but because he finally saw the truth." Silence. Thick, charged, irreversible. Marlene trembled where she stood, eyes glistening, fury draining into something hollow, exhausted, defeated. "You ruined this family," she whispered, voice cracking. I shook my head. "No, the truth didn't ruin this family, your lies did." Her breath hitched, and for the first time since I walked into the hall I felt it. Relief, release, freedom, not from the family, but from the weight of their story. Theirs was no longer mine to carry. After the fire, for a long moment after my final words settled into the air, the hall felt like the aftermath of a wildfire. Smoke still rising, heat still radiating, the landscape forever changed. No one quite knew where to step, or what remained standing. Marlene stood frozen, trembling, her eyes glassy with a mixture of rage, shame, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. The certainty she once wielded like a weapon had shattered. For the first time in my life, she looked small. Judith shifted uneasily beside her, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, her gaze flickering between me and the floor. Her son stared down at his shoes with a tight jaw, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Slowly, people began to move again. Chairs creaked, someone coughed. A few whispered among themselves with cautious, almost fearful curiosity. The storm had passed, But the ruins were undeniable. Whitmore stepped away from the podium, his face drawn but strangely relieved. "The proceedings are concluded," he announced softly. "The will is legally binding. There will be no further discussion on its legitimacy today." "Legally binding," someone muttered. "Even with that revelation?" Whitmore nodded firmly. "Especially with that revelation. William made his last wishes exceedingly clear." The murmuring resumed, less chaotic than before, but still tense, still charged. The crowd split into factions, those whispering sympathy, those vibrating with resentment, those stunned into quiet reflection. I stood alone in the front row, hands trembling at my sides. Now that the adrenaline had drained, a heavy numbness crept in. The truth, both truths, pressed against me from the inside. Learning he wasn't my biological grandfather had cracked something deep and delicate within me. But hearing how fiercely he loved me had rebuilt something stronger in its place. I wasn't sure which part hurt more, or which part healed more. Lawson approached slowly, leaning on his cane. His eyes glistened, and when he reached me, he placed a shaking hand on my shoulder. "He loved you, kid," he whispered. "More than he ever loved any of them. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The words pierced me, the kind of pain that carved space for something new. "Thank you," I managed, voice thick. Others began to drift toward me. A few offered quiet nods. One woman, someone I vaguely remembered from church years ago, murmured, "We always wondered why he pushed you away. Now it makes sense." A man added, "I'm sorry for what you went through. No one deserves that." Their words were small, but they chipped away at a heaviness I'd carried for too long. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marlene sway. Judith caught her elbow, whispering urgently. For the first time, her expression wasn't venomous. It was terrified. She glanced at me once more, but the fury had drained from her eyes. What remained was something colder, something hollow, the kind of emptiness that follows the collapse of a lie. She stumbled toward the exit without another word. The hall seemed to exhale when she left. Whitmore approached me quietly. Up close, I could see how exhausted he looked, like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. "You handled yourself with more dignity than most would," he said softly. I let out a humorless laugh. "I don't feel dignified." "No one does, standing in the truth." He hesitated. "But your grandfather wanted this moment. All of it. You should know that." My chest tightened again. "Why me?" I asked. "Why put all of this on me?" He tilted his head. "Because you were the only one strong enough to face it." I wasn't sure whether it was a compliment or a burden. Probably both. When the hall finally emptied, I found myself standing alone in the center of the room. The wooden floors were scuffed. The air still smelled of old paper and old anger. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting long stripes across the floorboards. In that fragile quiet, I understood something. This wasn't the end. It was the aftermath, the smoldering ground where something new would grow. But first I had to walk through the ashes. The legacy. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to my grandfather's house, the house that was now mine, though the idea still felt too large, too heavy, too unreal to sit comfortably in my chest. The old gravel driveway crunched beneath the tires, the same sound I had heard through countless childhood summers. But today it echoed differently, like I was arriving not as a visitor, but as someone returning to a place I had once belonged to without knowing it. The house stood quiet, solemn, a witness to 1,000 secrets. And now it felt like it was watching me. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of pine cleaner and old books washed over me, tangling nostalgia with grief. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles that floated like drifting memories. Every room felt frozen in time. His coat still hung by the door. His boots still rested beside the mat. A cup sat upside down by the sink, the way he always left it to dry. My throat tightened. This wasn't just inheritance. This was his absence made physical, his silence made visible. I wandered into his study, the heart of the house, the place where decisions were made and secrets were buried. The desk where the hidden compartment had slept for years sat in the center, its surface worn smooth by decades of his hands. I approached it slowly, touching the wood with trembling fingers. "You should have told me," I whispered. "I would have stayed. I would have helped you." My voice cracked around the edges of my words. Alone in that quiet room, I finally let myself grieve, not the man he pretended to be in his final months, but the man he truly was, beneath the armor of fear and pride. I sank into his old leather chair. It swallowed me in the same comforting way it had when I was a kid, sitting on his lap while he read newspapers or wrote letters. I let myself breathe, let myself remember, let myself hurt. On the desk sat a photograph I had never noticed before, an old picture of the two of us fishing by the river. I was maybe 6 years old, holding a tiny fish with both hands, grinning so wide my cheeks looked ready to burst. He was looking at me, not the camera, with an expression I had been too young to understand. Pride, love, fear, and a hint of sadness, maybe because he already knew he wasn't who I believed he was. I traced the edge of the frame. "I forgive you," I said softly. "For pushing me away, for being afraid, for leaving the truth for after." The words came easier than I expected, not because the pain had vanished, but because understanding had taken root. The truth didn't erase the years we had shared. It didn't rewrite the memories. It didn't make him less of my grandfather. Blood wasn't what tied us together. Love was, choice was, and he had chosen me, even when he feared losing me. A knock on the doorframe startled me. It was Lawson. He stepped inside slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically on the floor. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said gently. "Thought you might want some company." I nodded, grateful. He lowered himself into the chair across from me with a sigh. "He wanted you to have this place," he said. "Wanted someone here who wouldn't let the house turn into a battlefield." I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one's ever ready," Lawson said with a faint smile. "But you're the only one who won't let the ghosts win." I looked around the study again, the books, the photos, the echoes of laughter and arguments and late-night conversations. "This house has stories," Lawson said. "Some painful, some beautiful, but they're yours now." I took a deep breath and let the truth settle. I wasn't defined by lies. I wasn't defined by blood. I wasn't defined by the cruelty of others. I was defined by love, by resilience, by the man who believed in me even when he didn't know how to show it, and by the legacy he left behind. Not the land or the money, but the courage to face the truth and build something new from the ashes. As the sun dipped behind the trees outside, casting long golden rays across the room, I whispered the words that closed the chapter for both of us. "I'm home."